what is SaaS security? Because the acronym, well, in security, more so than development, we have so many acronyms that I don't know half of them, to be honest with you. I do know what SaaS security is, but for the benefit of the audience, we're going to chunk down nice and in detail on this topic. Kevin Smouts is our guest today, and he is the co-founder and chief product officer of Zygon. And Zygon helps startups to avoid data breaches, specifically from SaaS providers. Is that correct, Kevin?
Yeah, pretty much. High level, yes, absolutely.
Okay, so Kevin, are you okay to give the audience a little bit of a background, please, to yourself, if that's okay?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, very thankful for the invitation to the podcast. Thank you, Nick, for having me and being able to share a little bit more about what is actually SaaS security, or what are we trying to do to kind of like solve and improve SaaS security overall. About myself, so Kevin Smouts, I lived for 10 years in the US on the West Coast in San Francisco. Now I'm back in France. I'm a father of two. I've been in and out of like consulting jobs, startups, doing a bunch of different roles. At the core, I'm like a product guy, and that's what I ended up doing here at Zygon when we founded Zygon. I've been with around IT and security teams, my whole career. And it's been a very interesting and humbling experience to see, how things should be done, how they actually are done, and why they're done this way, and how difficult it is to do it the right way compared to the way it is. So I have a lot of empathy for, the IT and security teams, and that's kind of like how we got launched into building out Zygon. Was like, how do we help with this massive task at hand, which is SaaS security? We've been working on Zygon for the past 2 years now. We raised funds last year, about $3 million in a seed round, out of like the first prototypes we had with a couple of customers, and we've been building the companies with our initial customers and expanding the customer base ever since. So it's been going great since our public launch in October. Yeah.
Nice, fantastic to hear that you guys are on track. So I wanted to get into a little bit about, what is SaaS security. And we've spoke previously about what is this shared responsibility model then that is thrown around in SaaS. Could you explain that to me a little bit further then?
Yeah, I mean, I can do it from like a Wikipedia perspective, but I can do it a little bit more with like how our co-founders and we got there basically. So particularly Thomas and I, our CEO, we were working together at Odaceva. We're like a data protection company, especially in the Salesforce ecosystem, basically doing data extraction, meaning backup, data management, copy of data across environments, etc. for Salesforce, which is quite a heavy and complicated task. And the reason we both joined that company was because in our previous experience, we saw the explosion of SaaS usage, across smaller teams, medium-sized team, and even the enterprise. And in my consulting days, I was also advocating a lot to use SaaS because overall it was more secure from just the perspective of against, applications that were developed locally and without much more scrutiny. Here you had like a full team dedicated to it. It was out in the open, and there was a lot more security than what was done then. But the question was still like, okay, now we're moving into that space where companies are using a lot of SaaS everywhere. We overall feel it's a pretty good thing, but there's obviously it's a trade-off. Like it's like everything in IT and security, it's always a trade-off. There's always you're gaining something, but there's something you're letting go. And at the time, we were not sure what that was, right? Yeah. What was the trade-off that we need to do and how companies were actually implementing it. And we joined Odaceva because it was the first time that someone had both a problem and an answer for this part. And this was already around the shared security model. And to make it short it's pretty much, as a software developer, the SaaS developer, right? The SaaS creator and maintainer. So it could be Salesforce, it could be Figma, it could be whatever. they have the responsibility for their software and the infrastructure they host it on. And even then, the infrastructure, sometimes it's not their infrastructure. Most of the time, it's going to be, AWS or Google Cloud. So even then, they're not really responsible. They just delegate that responsibility altogether. But in general, they are responsible for this. But what you do with the data that you put into those applications and the way you configure the access, that's the responsibility still of the customer. And that's what they call the shared responsibility model. So if I make it simple, I can buy Notion, and Notion will make sure that their software is secure and hosted securely, etc. But if on my side I decide to store credit card information on Notion, that's my problem, right? It's not Notion's problem that they are storing credit card information. It's whatever someone put it in. The same way, if my password leaks out in the open, that's my responsibility to change it. It's not Notion's responsibility to make sure the account is safe in that way. It's a user error. And then the problem is that it goes further because the SaaS are getting much more complicated with a lot of configuration.
Yeah.
And those configuration can get tricky. And that's where the zone becomes kind of gray, because now you're telling your customers that your SaaS is super easy to do, but then you give them like tons of configuration that they're not sure what to do with that configuration. And that's what keeps them secure, right? So do you enforce MFA? Do you multi-factor authentication? Do you enforce single sign-on? What do you do with guest users? What can guest users see? What do you do with integrations between those different SaaS and this type of things? And they provide the tools, the integration, but they don't really care about what you do with it and what impact it has on your own security model, basically.
Yeah.
That's the shared responsibility model. And that's what was interesting with Odaceva, the first company we joined, and founding Zygon. The whole idea was this shared responsibility model breaks when you multiply it by hundreds of SaaS that are actually in use in the company, because no one can be an expert on hundreds of SaaS.
Yeah.
You don't know what configuration settings are available and what you can do, and is it good in terms of the actual security model that they apply and this type of thing. So that's kind of the difficulty we wanted to address.
Yeah, absolutely. And do you think, just going back to your point about the enforcing policies, about the SSO, about the MFA, I'm just seeing in the last sort of 3-4 years, just an explosion of the need for authentication, for identity. And is this as a result of AI, or am I being naive in the sense of, no, Nick, it's there's always been a need for it. It's just AI sort of brought it more into the limelight. What's your view on that?
Yeah, well, definitely it's been a long and dry road for people that were advocating that for the past years. I think there are a couple of things that made it click recently. So AI is obviously one, because the appeal of those tools for users is extremely important, and the appeal for those users to put in confidential information is really important, because you don't want to read through pages and pages of contractual information. So you're going to ask ChatGPT about it. The problem is that you're uploading like a confidential document, a contract to ChatGPT, and that's a big no-no, obviously. So the appeal is enormous with this, but I would actually advocate that on AI, I mean, you need to have visibility about what people are using and maybe guide to understand the use cases that make sense for your company, and then maybe guide them in the better direction. But overall, I don't think that's the bigger problem. What we see is there are massive attacks against SaaS that are being undertaken. So the most recent one that everybody is talking about today, obviously, is with Snowflake, right? So Snowflake was targeted, and it was targeted with stolen identities. So it was not an issue on Snowflake particularly. They were not leaking any information. It's just that those big SaaS being, and by the way, let's stop talking about SaaS. Let's talk about applications in general, because it's basically an account on the internet and you can log in there. Whether it's a SaaS or not, that's different. That's a pricing model. But let's talk about application. And so those applications have become so big that they become like a massive infrastructure node for a lot of different companies. So they are a perfect point of attack for malicious actors. So you had recently Snowflake. Obviously, you have Okta, and that happened quite a bit before. But there's tons of all of these attacks that happen quite a lot all the time. And sometimes it's actually the fault of the SaaS provider. They don't secure properly. They leak some of the data, etc. And so you still need to have visibility, because obviously Snowflake or Okta is more something. Those are the visible parts of the iceberg. So those are so big that usually IT and security teams know they are using that, right? But what about some Dropbox accounts? What about some Twilio accounts? So what about, so there's like smaller things that are not necessarily seen by the people in charge in terms of security, that get the information that those applications have been hacked or have some form of vulnerability. And so they don't know who's using that, how to contact them, how to track resolution of the thing. And so, one of the most common use case we have among our customers is, well, thanks to you, I've heard there was an attack on, this particular SaaS application. I go into Zygon, I check who's using that. I see the list of people using that. I can contact them directly, tell them exactly what to do, track them in a to-do, and then actually enforce the resolution of like, have you changed your password? Have you activated MFA? And then we're good. And before, they had no way of knowing who was using that, and then enforce and do an actual action on top of it, right?
Okay. It sounds like a lot of processes. So who actually has the time for SaaS security? Is it the security team's responsibility? Because there's a lot going on here, Kevin. There's a lot going on.
Right. So we started Zygon with the idea that it was a lost battle if you had only the security team trying to fight this, right? And the reason is quite simple: is on one side you have a team that is, at best, on regular size, medium size companies, 3 to 15 people, right? IT, security, all together. When the rest of the company is like 1,000 people or 2,000 people. So those 2,000 people, they wake up every morning and they have the ability to go check product hunt. Oh, that's a new product that seems interesting to me. I'm going to try it out. Maybe use it in the context of a specific project that I'm using, that I'm doing with my coworkers. Maybe it will stick, and maybe we'll start using it for other projects, and it start being something that we call, shadow SaaS, shadow IT in that context. On the other side, you have IT teams that have a huge, flow of vendor vetting and approval, and that takes quite a lot of time for every new request for purchase that actually happen. And business don't necessarily want to go through this all the time. They just do, they use their own credit card on the side. They do something like this. And so what ends up happening is it's a loss in that case. It's a loss for the security and IT team, because they don't have visibility into something where they should have, and they should do something about it, not necessarily block it. And it's a loss on the other side because you don't configure it properly, and it might impact the whole business altogether. Or maybe there's a better solution somewhere else, and this one's actually pretty bad, the one that you've just chosen, because you just don't know where the data is hosted and this type of things, right? So it's a lose-lose situation in that context. And we want to make it into kind of like a win-win situation where what can we do if we stay in a permissive organization, but you have instant visibility about everything that everyone's doing, right? We auto discover the applications being used, the accounts being created. But since you have instant visibility, you can also have instant advice and remediation and automated advice and remediation. And what happens then is you have really 1, 2, 3 steps that actually enables the whole thing to work together. First thing is productivity and automation for the IT team. They detect, they can trigger, some workflows and do things about that. Trigger just a start of a discussion with someone, which is already a huge loss of time in a typical situation. Then you have collaborations between teams that start to happen where people are understanding there's work to be done and they are more than happy to actually collaborate to this whole process because they want to use that solution. And so you get a collaboration, better collaboration between IT and security. You get a better collaboration between IT and the rest of the company, like end users, and same for security and end users. And you start to see conversation. And it's basically the thing is, as a security person, you should be talking to people all the time. It's better awareness, it's a better understanding of the business practices, etc. But you don't have time. You're just running and extinguishing fires everywhere. So how do we scale that? How do we put things on your lap that make sense and have just a little bit of action, a little bit of time to trigger a lot more things behind the scene that actually make it work with the rest of the company. And so in the end, it's everyone's responsibility, right? And it's obviously, and we think it starts with IT in a sense of let's do an inventory and let's start cleaning up and let's understand what we have. It starts with IT, obviously, but then very quickly in a couple of weeks of setup, you're already talking to end users because you've detected something. You're requesting a justification of usage. Why are you using this? It seemed we had an appropriate tool for that, and you start doing it naturally, and it's flows of discussion and collaboration that did not exist before, really.
What's coming on that is that not, are we delving into another realm of this vacuum that is security? Because now we're going into security awareness. So like, is security awareness is very different, or is it very different to SaaS? Because we're talking security awareness in a little bit more human centric SaaS software as a service, so like security as a service. So like we're talking about two different concepts. Like, are you trying to blend the two now, or do we have to work in unison for it all to work? Would we be naive to ignore the security awareness side of it? Talk to me about how you're bringing security awareness into SaaS security now.
Well, when I was in consulting, we did a lot of training sessions and awareness session about certain new technologies, new ways of doing things, etc. And the one that really worked were the one that were actionable and where people could do something about it and could immediately apply what they were learning, right? So our bet with Zygon, which we think it's actually not really a bet, it's like we have like full trust into it working, is employees are not malicious. Like, it's very rare that an employee is actually malicious. It's like they can be ignorant about something, and the awareness program is typically not good to make them less ignorant because it's too many slides, it's too many big words. We were talking about it at the beginning in security, like the amount of glossary that you need to ingest to understand cybersecurity, even though the core concepts are really not that complicated.
Yeah.
It's quite insane. So it feels really remote for everyone. And I see it, if I start talking to people saying, oh, I'm a founder for a cybersecurity company, or they just shut down, like, oh, wow. It's like, no, we help you use the tools that you want to use every day, right? But in a more secure manner so that you don't get hacked in the back. That suddenly makes sense, and that opens up the discussion way more. So awareness in that typical like grandstanding of like a big lecture, and then you need to sign at the bottom of the sheet, etc. It's starting to die off quite fast, and I'm really happy with that. What we're trying to provide on top of the better security awareness is just-in-time awareness. I don't know how you call it, but it's like in the context of the action that you're doing, of like signing up for a new SaaS, making you feel the gravity or the reality of your actions, like signing up for an account with your company, for your company, like you're engaging more than you, right? And that's in your professional in a professional setting, you're engaging more than you. And so IT will have to look into it, and they will ask you to do some things, and etc. And if you agree with that, we're fine, right? If you can report against the user on that SaaS that you're using, you can say, set a term to your trial, like I'm going to try it for 3 months, and I'm not going to put any very sensitive information on it, and we'll revisit in 3 months, and everyone's fine with that, and that's kind of like the permissive environment we want to be in. But making them feel the reality and the gravitas of what they're doing is what really is the true awareness. It's like in the action that you're doing of using this, it's like, okay, there's something. And then when you don't know, you know where to turn, where you turn to, that person who just contacted you to ask for justification, well, you can ask them directly, what should I do about this? Is it like a good practice or a bad practice? Because suddenly you have a conversation happening.
Yeah.
That's really what we're trying to encourage beyond awareness in the grand standing sense, is discussion about that topic. It's not a topic relegated to the IT team that is on the basement level of the company, right?
Yeah, no, exactly. So obviously, security SaaS, it's been around now for a little bit, and I want to know why Zygon are unique in the sense of the fact that they help startups to avoid data breaches from from SaaS providers. Has there not been anyone? Is this a pure gap in the market where you guys are like, we can help out here, or is there something more unique about Zygon in how you guys actually help out?
Well, there's definitely, obviously we're unique and we're the best out there. but no, I mean, from a more analytical perspective, what we saw really was there was a first answer to that issue of cloud security as a whole, when people starting putting code online and in infrastructure as a service provider, so AWS, Google Cloud, Azure, etc. Because you had code that was running on your own data center for those big companies, suddenly it was somewhere else, and it was not protected in the same way. And so we saw a lot of misconfiguration issues that happened. And even though everything was done properly by AWS and these other providers, providing the right APIs, the right controls, but there were so many controls and APIs that was very difficult to see. So you had the first wave of companies you called CSPM, to Cloud Security Posture Management, which is really, we're going to audit the configuration of those cloud providers and give you the best specs. So you have an S3 bucket, on AWS, like a repository for file that is too open, too widely open. Well, here's the type of configuration you need to do. And they were really leading the way into what needed to be done. So those are an absolute must-have today if you're running code in the cloud. And then some people said, well, let's do the same thing for SaaS. It's just the same. So, and they started going after the biggest SaaS out there. And we know something. We were on Salesforce for a while, and Salesforce same has tons of security configuration and issues with users, etc. And also Salesforce had tons of instances. So you need to deploy your configuration across multiple instances and not miss one. So it is a big topic. But when we looked at it, we're like, this is not the issue of SaaS. The issue of SaaS is not like the depth of configuration. It's the scale of the number of apps that you need to manage. And when we were looking at traditional SSPM that were doing a really good job at like a small level, a small number of SaaS, they were not covering the hundreds of SaaS that companies were using, right? They were covering and being set up on 15, 20 application maximum in one company. And the discussion with CISOs and CIOs was really simple. It was, you're covering 15 or 20 applications. Yes. Do you have only 15 or 20 applications? No. Do you know which one you have? Not really. Okay. So what do we do about it, and how do we solve that? So I think there's a discovery and an angle of trying to cover everything that is very unique to us, and the other part is really to do it in a very flexible way for the IT and security team. Like you can configure it really the way you want, because those processes are quite complex in every organization. And in the end, the only places where we have a strong opinion are how do you discuss with your end users, how collaboration actually works with your end users. And this is where we're putting a lot of like the modern SaaS approach of like discussing with the users. We use Slack notification. You're not receiving an email, you're receiving a nice notification with clear actions on it, and the interface is easy to use, etc. It's a big jump from what the traditional IT workflows actually do, in that sense. So yeah, I think in that way we're really unique, but I think the market had a big gap in addressing like a larger, wider number of apps. And in the end, you don't cover all of your shadow IT apps. You cover a certain subset of it that you feel is relevant, but it's still way more than the 20, 30 that you had in the first place.
Nice. No, really well detailed. Pretty much my final question. It's a bit of a left field one, so it might not even make the final cut. Who knows? But security SaaS, where do you think we're at in terms of its lifespan? Is it still a baby that needs looking after? Is it a turbulent 2-year-old, or is it like a teenager with growing pains, and or is it an adult that's mature and it goes about its life? Where do you see security SaaS in its life cycle at this moment in time?
We feel the way we are approaching it is very early and new, um, and the customers we're working with are very varied in terms of maturity on that topic. There are some who've done a lot of things manually and they don't want to do it manually anymore, and so they're more than happy to have a solution like us. And we basically try to maintain what they have and augment it, but they're very few. A lot of companies have really not started. They have a spreadsheet in a corner of like the couple of apps that they think they are using, and the rest is like, well, we don't really know, or we don't really want to see.
Yeah.
And so they really want a path in like, how do we deal with that? What do we do with this? And I think the collaborative path is really the option there. Really the big question where this will go is, you look at the recent data from CrowdStrike in terms of like the attacks and the profile of attacks that we've seen in the past year. Most of them are like identity based attacks. So it's going to be an account that should have been closed that is not closed, an account that should have been secure because with multi-factor authentication, single sign-on that is not for some reason covered by this. An account with reused credentials, phishing attacks, and all those type of things. Basically, it's all of those all together, and they represent most of the attacks. And so they're obviously targeting, SaaS applications because they are the ones that are most used. It's easier to impersonate, Okta than to impersonate your small and crumbly, business application that only that existed out there. And so with this is basically when we move from the spreadsheet to like an environment where we auto-detect and you have workflows and you can discuss with the actual individuals and not just the owners of the applications, but really like who's using it inside it and what they're doing with it. You have a different scale. You have like a better granularity at the account level of like each of those applications. And that account may not be in the exact same workspace as this other one. Like you may have 3 Dropbox instances across your organization instead of 1. You may have 5 AWS accounts instead of 1. So those are very interesting topics to dig into. So I think that's the future. It's like as we go down a level of granularity and we look at accounts and people, you have a lot of things that are interesting, because now suddenly it's not only your employees, it's your the freelancers that you're working with that appear in your company because they actually have accounts in your applications. It's going to be temporary workers, it's going to be external workers. What you do with it is going to be people that sign up improperly with their personal credentials, and all of these things kind of like now happen where the definition of the company is like the boundary of what a company is, an organization is more blurry, and we start seeing that appear in our system, and it's because you've went down like one level of granularity to the account and you look at what's happening there, really.
Gotcha. Um, Kevin, thank you very much for joining us on the Security Space. I can't believe we've come to the time. I feel like we've only just started, to be honest
Yeah.
with you. So we definitely might need an episode 2 for that one. But if anybody has any questions for Kevin or would like to learn more about Zygon and their offerings, I'll be sure to put all the information down below. But Kevin, once again, thank you very much for coming on the Security Space.
Thank you for having me, Nick.